I have a business idea. I source you out as a good investor. I send you my deck. What are the 3 things you're going to look at first straight away?
The first thing, quite a high level, is just the general kind of look and feel of the deck. Like, this is how you're getting your brand across. And I think it's really important that you sell yourself well.
What does the fundraising process actually look like?
There's no sort of easy answer to that, because sometimes, it all depends on a load of different factors. Sometimes funding rounds can be done and dusted in a couple of weeks. Sometimes they can take a year. I've worked at a lot of startups. I've worked underneath a lot of great founders. It's not always the thing that makes you want to go to the pub with that person. You're not necessarily looking for your best mate. In many ways, the best founders are going to be pretty hard, tough-skinned people. So it's not just like, do I think they're a lovely bloke? Am I going to hang out with them all the time?
What would make you walk away from a deal?
I think just finding a founder hard to work with. If a founder suddenly got a bit ahead of themselves and suddenly said, you know what, we're about to close the round, but actually I think the valuation should be way higher, and suddenly kind of moving the goalpost.
What advice do you wish every founder raising money could hear before they start the process?
Get the materials ready, get the data room ready. You know what you're going to be asked, so get that in a good place. But another thing that's a massive turn off for investors is when you get young founders saying, we are going to sell the business in year 3 for this money, giving you a 7.8 times return on your money. And you're like, what bullshit is that? Why are you even saying that?
How do you know the right founders to back and the right ones to not? Because I guess that is a really hard task. Before we get into today's episode, I want to give a shout out to a special sponsor, Sam Lawrence Recruitment. We all know that finding the right people or the right job can feel really overwhelming, and that's exactly where Sam comes in. He really just gets it. It's not just about ticking boxes, it's about connecting the right people with the right opportunities. He takes the time to understand you and exactly what you're looking for, whether you're building a team or taking that next career leap. So definitely get in touch. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Charlie is a 3-time founding member of Startup Brands, taking each from 0 to 1 million within 18 months. Across different categories, channels and countries, including launching operations in the US and Australia. He is now the founder of Plug-in Brands, an award-winning outsourced FMCG sales agency working with the fast-growth food and drink brands, and Dive-In Agency, a TikTok shop agency helping brands turn social commerce into real revenue. With a background in go-to-market strategy, brand development and distribution through retail and wholesale channels, there isn't anyone better placed to help you supercharge your brand. Charlie and the Plug-in Brands team work with a host of brands, including Moju, Muller, Clipper Tea, Who Gives a Crap, and Lovecorn. So if you're in need of an extra pair of hands to really step on your growth this year, Charlie is the guy you need to be in touch with. Now, if you're running a product business and your inventory lives across spreadsheets, emails, and about 6 different systems, this one's definitely for you. Unleashed is an inventory management platform built for manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers, giving you one source of truth across your stock, orders, and operations. It automates the repetitive stuff too, things like purchase orders, stock updates, low stock alerts, so that your team can focus on growing the business, not firefighting. They're already trusted by brands like Candy Kittens, Perfect Head, Borough Broth, and Refi, and they integrate with tools you're already probably using, including Shopify, QuickBooks, and Salesforce. So if you're scaling a product business and want to get your operations under control, head over and start a free 14-day trial. And as a Getting to Grow listener, you'll get 1 month free using the code GTGPOD. Getting to Grow is also brought to you by the Coconut Collab. And full disclosure, as I'm sure most of you are aware, I work there. So I know how much love goes into everything that we make. We're all about creating delicious, dairy-free, plant-based treats that do not compromise on taste. From our creamy yogurts to our indulgent desserts, everything's made with coconuts and a whole lot of care. If you're looking for something naturally good but seriously tasty, and my favourite is just our natural coconut yogurt, I have it most mornings with granola and lots of honey. Trust me, you're going to absolutely love it. Welcome back to another episode of Getting to Grow. On this week's episode, actually, it's quite a different one. So he is a founder. Sorry, you are a founder. But as in like a founder of a, not necessarily like not a product, but I guess a service, which is your money.
Yeah.
And you put your money into businesses within FMCG. So I'd love to welcome to the podcast Nick Green, FMCG angel investor. Hello.
Hello. Nice to be here. Thanks.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on Getting to Grow. I thought it'd be interesting to have a sit down chat with you because we speak about investment a lot on the podcast. You know, I've spoken to upwards of nearly 80 founders. You know, some have raised, some haven't raised, some are looking to raise, some never want to raise. And I thought actually it'd be great to bring like a proper expert in their field as to like all about the world of investment and kind of raising and investment and funding and all that jazz that, as I say, I don't know much about. So I'm interested to get into it.
Cool.
But Nick, you've sat on both sides of the table. So as an operator at companies like Deliveroo, Weezy, and now you're an investor backing over 100 startups, which is amazing. Talk us through your journey, I guess what you were maybe doing before, and then how you kind of got to where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a little bit of a kind of convoluted route, but I started out, as you say, on the other side as an operator. I left university, didn't have much of an idea of what I wanted to do, thought I was going to go into finance and law like everyone else that I was around, and then, yeah, kind of fell into the startup world. Joined a few that, you know, you wouldn't have heard of that haven't sort of turned into much. Got very lucky and joined Deliveroo as a very early employee there and went through a really interesting journey for a couple of years with them. So I was head of sales at Deliveroo for a few years. As you mentioned, I was at a place called Weezy, and that was a weird story where I actually angel invested in Weezy. I was an SCIS, like super early investor in Weezy, and then ended up actually coming on full time as a director and was there for a pretty brief period of time because we then sold the business. So that was an interesting journey and lots of other startups in between. But I mean, I won't go into all of them, but essentially a lot of kind of senior commercial roles. I helped a couple of US businesses enter the UK and Europe, and so did a few jobs in that space. And along the way, I just started racking up a few angel investments. It was never a kind of thought through strategy. It was quite random, but I guess I had gone down the startup route. As I mentioned, all of my friends were bankers and lawyers and consultants and much more, you know, mainstream jobs. So anyone's friend of a friend of a friend had a startup idea and they would say, oh, you've got to go and speak to Nick, my token startup friend. So I ended up speaking to a lot of founders about their ideas, kind of, you know, before they'd even done anything. And at the same time, Deliveroo in particular kind of obviously became very successful, was very visible. So a lot of potential founders thought, oh, well, this guy, you know, knows what he's doing in certain area. So yeah, I just had a lot of deals come my way. I wrote a few small checks into them, and some have gone on to do really, really well and, you know, becoming household names and, you know, hopefully going to do well out of them. You know, plenty haven't, but as you say, I've done a lot. And there's a bit of a hack involved in how I've done so many, because what started happening was with me doing more and more, I started having funds and family offices and much richer investors kind of come to me and say, hey, random guy, we keep seeing your name crop up. You know, we're looking into a business, we're getting excited about it. We look at who the existing investors are and there's your name. So they wanted me to start sending them stuff. So I became a bit of a scout for different people. I was, you know, sending around a lot of deal flow, trying to be helpful. Some funds would send me stuff and say, we'd love to get your view. But mainly it was just me being the person that found stuff and just shared it. And what I started doing was saying to actually more the other way around, founders started saying to me, look, it's really great that you want to invest. Your ticket sizes are quite small. We're trying to raise, you know, a lot more money than that. So we'd love to have you as an investor, but also if you could help us find the rest of the round, you know, that would be really helpful. So what I kind of fell into was basically helping founders fill the rest of the round. And the way I would work is I would charge a small success fee if I was to introduce them to people, and then I would just reinvest that back into the rounds. It allowed me to invest in way more companies. I could see something, be like, oh, I really love this. Don't necessarily have, you know, enough money to do the full round, but I can go and find those people. And so, yeah, I have raised money for 120 plus different businesses, and that allows me to kind of get involved in all of them. And it's just been ramping up and up and up. And I raised money for and invested in 25 or so different businesses last year. So yeah, involved in a lot.
Whoa, seriously, you definitely have your hands full, hey? And I know we spoke about like your journey just then, but was there like a kind of a proper moment where you thought, I want to like leave a business from building them to kind of like backing them?
Yeah, I think I wasn't a great employee, and I think I kind of recognized that about myself, in that I would be at a company, for a couple of years and I'd sort of get itchy feet. And it was both in terms of pouring all of my effort into one thing and constantly seeing new businesses come along and sort of thinking they looked exciting. So it's a combination of, I really loved that side of angel investing, constantly being able to see new things, speak to new founders, dip my toe in the water. And also, with obviously a couple of exceptions, I also found kind of pragmatically that you could put a lot of time into a startup that you were working for full time, thinking your equity was going to, let you retire. And then so many of them go wrong. And actually, maybe a better approach to this early stage game is to hedge your bets and have lots of different holdings. And also, I think it plays into kind of, what I like. I like connecting people. I'm a good networker. So it sort of played into that. So I was able to do it as a side hustle for a long time. And then it's just over time grown and grown and grown and become the sort of the main thing now.
And how did the seed fund at Active Partners shape the way you look at founders, I guess, in today's world?
Yeah, it was interesting. So Active, that came about because I had known them for a number of years. They were traditionally a later stage investor coming in when businesses were doing, really big numbers in terms of revenue, and they used to invest at checks of kind of 5 million plus. I'd sent them a lot of deals over the years that they'd said no to because the deals were just too early for them. And then they were starting to basically see that those businesses were going on to, later reach the stage where they would look at them and they were kind of kicking themselves because they could have got in, a few years previously and got all of that upside. So, there were various businesses I had sent them, that fitted that mold, whether it's Wild Deodorant or Moth Cocktails or Lick Paint or whatever. So they came to me and said, we'd actually like to be in a position to take advantage of those kind of deals and do an earlier stage fund. You've got lots of deal flow, you've got experience as an operator, why don't you come on board and do that? It was really interesting going into an actual kind of professional finance setup because, I'd been dabbling in this game, but it was just, I'm not doing a huge amount of financial, analysis. I'm looking at obviously the high level numbers. It's more kind of gut feel for the founder, for the market, my own experience of being an operator and knowing what the challenges are. Going in somewhere like Active, which has been going for, decades and is much more rooted, most of the team, I was probably one of the very few people in the team who hadn't got a background in investment banking, for example. They're used to looking at businesses in a very, very different way. So yeah, it was just a different approach, kind of a more professionalizing that kind of investment lens, I guess. But no, it was interesting. And they, they have backed a lot of great brands over the years, whether it's Soho House, which we were talking about earlier, through to lots of things in hospitality like Honest Burgers and Leon and things like that. So they've gone through cycles. They've seen the ups and the downs. They've invested in all types of businesses, and yeah, no, it was a really interesting experience to go into a professional investment environment. I'd say coming back to that, not being a great employee, not loving working in a kind of corporate structure, I always wanted to be running my own thing and eventually have my own fund. So I think it was a great experience, but I not necessarily destined to work in that kind of environment.
And what was the first company that you ever put money in?
Very good question. The first one, and it is actually hopefully approaching a good outcome. It's actually a really good example because it started out in a certain area. It was originally a recruitment platform called Talent Pool, and it has morphed and broken into multiple other different businesses. And yeah, it has become a very different business today. But very, very good founder who has been very adaptable, very resilient, and the business is nothing like the business I invested in 2013, but
Okay.
it is 2013, 2014, but it is still doing well. Some of the early ones, I also invested in a legal tech business. I started out quite techie, actually, before the kind of consumer stuff came later. So one of my other early investments, which has done really well, was a legal tech business called Juro, which I was using in my role at Deliveroo as head of sales. We were sending out a load of contracts. We started using this really early stage company, and I preferred it to the big companies in that space, and just said to the founder, if you're ever fundraising, let me know, and I'd love to put some money in. And it turned out the other people investing in that angel round were the guy that founded TransferWise, the guy that founded Indeed.com, the guy that founded Gumtree, and me. So I was very lucky to sort of get in that. But then in terms of brands, things like, Lick Paint, Moth Cocktails, SURI toothbrushes, Surreal
I've got
cereal.
Mark coming on in 2 or 3 weeks.
Fantastic. Well, you should absolutely find out his fascinating story. I mean, that business is doing incredibly well, and Mark and Give have done a great job. And I think they just launched in Target in the US. So
Wow.
things are going well. I mean, they've done a great job in the UK, but now they're on to bigger and better things. So I was the first round into that, right back at the beginning of the SURI journey. I think I had one of the first sort of prototype SURI toothbrushes before they were actually on sale, and it's still going strong. So it's a good testament to the product. But it's funny because I found a lot of investors that went into that business, and hopefully they'll be very grateful to me one day when that turns into a big return for them. But a lot of people didn't see it, and it's another example of, it's easy with hindsight, but actually someone coming along and saying, we're doing electric toothbrushes, sometimes it's quite hard to believe the hype and get super excited about something like that. But actually, huge category, a couple of big businesses that have dominated for ages, and they've got weak points and blind spots, and along came these guys, really smart, really kind of focused, and have built an amazing business, which is taking a lot of market share off some really massive companies. So
but that's a really good segue, I guess, actually, to something then. How do you have that gut feel? Because I'm thinking now, God, I want to invest my £10.50 that I have in my bank account. But how do you know the right founders to back and the right ones to not? Because I guess that is a really hard task.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I had a really simple answer for that, we'd all be doing it right, and no one would ever back the wrong founders, and we'd all be Sequoia or whoever. But it's just a feel for it, and there are a combination of factors. They've got to be smart, they've got to be compelling and charismatic for a number of reasons, because they've got to hire the right people, they've got to raise money off the right people. You've got to think of all the different things that founder has to get right over the next few years. They've got to, as I say, build an amazing team around them. They've got to probably convince, round after round of investors, different types of investors, from little old angel investors like me at the start to big institutional investors later on. They've got to also be able to deal with all sorts of much more kind of granular, nitty gritty things of dealing with suppliers and dealing with factories and whatever. There's a real kind of range of skills, and you just got to think, do they have that? And crucially, back to that point previously, do they have the resilience? Because there are going to be loads of really tough times. Even some of my most successful investments, which are now flying, and people are, oh God, I know that brand, like, oh my God, that business, it's always been amazing, right? I can tell you times when lots of these businesses have been weeks away from going bust, or funding rounds have nearly fallen through, or huge issues in supply chain, all sorts of nightmares. And so it's that combination of are they smart, are they charismatic, have they got all those things, but are they also tough enough to deal with the fact that it's not going to go right? And so it is a massive cliche, and it's not a very satisfactory answer, but you just meet people sometimes and you think, I know you're going to do well. It might not even be this business, but you've got something. I would back you. And sometimes I look back and I think, God, I met that person, I wasn't convinced by the idea, but I did just think they were great, and I should have just invested anyway, because they managed to make it work somehow. And you do get a lot of investors talking about like, oh, I always knew their first business wouldn't work out, but their second business would be great. And that's another story. If you're doing it with your own money, that's quite hard to do. As a fund, maybe you can play that game of being like just getting in with the right founder, even if you're backing the wrong business. But yeah, it's just about feel for people. And I've worked at a lot of startups. I've worked underneath a lot of great founders, been very close to them, and you start to see what makes them work. It's not always the thing that makes you want to go to the pub with that person. You're not necessarily looking for your like best mate. In many ways, the best founders are going to be pretty, hard, pretty like tough skinned people. So there's definitely probably a high correlation with successful founders and certain kind of quite negative traits. So it's not just like, do I think they're a lovely bloke? Am I going to hang out with them all the time? But yeah, I'm sorry I can't give you a more sort of detailed answer, but it is just, you get a feel for people, and I say that in the full knowledge that I get a feel for someone, and often doesn't work out. So
I was going to ask you, have you talk us through maybe a round that you invested, but maybe it didn't go to plan?
Yeah, I mean, look, a few over the last 2 years that have not gone right. I'm trying to think of a couple that have gone bust recently. There was a business called Hanks, Hanx, which was like a
the
condom business, and like really great founders, really interesting space. That the thesis was basically that actually a really high percentage of condoms are bought by women, but all the brands are very like macho and masculine focused, and they were doing a kind of holistic, there were more products than just that, but that was their main thing. And, they were a doctor and an ex-Goldman Sachs banker and like really amazing people. And it just, I'm sure there will be big brands in that space at some time. They were just maybe a bit ahead of their time, and it just didn't work out. But that one has sadly failed recently. I backed a really amazing organic baby food business called Mama Maids. The product was great. Reviews were great. I really feel like now it would probably be doing really well. There's been quite a lot of interesting structural stuff going on in baby food. I don't know if you've been sort of keeping track of that. I think they'd probably be doing really well off the back of that, but they just weren't in the right place at the right time. They had some supply chain issues. It didn't work out. I was an investor in a better for you donuts business called Urban Legend, which you might have seen. And again, it was really interesting because it was initially so beautifully timed in that it was when the HFSS stuff came in. At one point in time, Krispy Kreme were going to be kicked out of all the big supermarkets because the products were too unhealthy to sell in the way that they were sold and merchandised. So it looked like they were going to get an incredible deal where essentially they were going to, this brand Urban Legend were going to replace Krispy Kreme in Tesco. And Krispy Kreme does tens of millions of revenue just in Tesco. So it was going to be an incredible place to start for the brand. Then the government sort of rode back from the HFSS and loosened it. So actually Krispy Kreme could still sell. So then this company was selling alongside Krispy Kreme, and, it was a healthier product, but arguably not quite as tasty. So, there are some categories where consumers will take a sort of less tasty product for health. Something indulgent like donuts, less so. So sadly, that one didn't work out. And look, I could go on about plenty. That's the reality of this, is that, plenty do not work out, but loads of good ones as well.
Do you literally lose your money?
Mm-hmm.
So you put the cash in, if it goes bust, you get nil back?
Not quite, because if you are a UK taxpayer investing in a UK business, there are some quite nice incentives the government gives you so that you do get some of your money back. Okay. And you do protect some of your downside. So in rough terms, so this is called the EIS scheme, Entrepreneurs Investment Scheme, and or maybe it's Enterprise Investment Scheme. I always forget that. And anyway, if I invested £10,000 into a business, I would get 30% of my investment straight back from HMRC. So I get £3,000 straight back, regardless of of what happens in the long run. So and when I say get it back, I can knock it off my tax bill. Yeah. I then, if that business does really well and goes up in value and it sells or whatever, I pay no capital gains. So usually if you buy or sell a property or shares in something and it goes up, you still pay a tax on that. These are exempt from that. So you do get more on the upside. But sorry, we're talking about the downside. If it then goes bust, you then get further bit of cash back. You get something called loss relief. So you've only risked 70% of your money because you got 30% straight back. Of that 70%, you get a percentage equivalent to how much you pay in income tax. So to make that make sense, if you pay 45% income tax, you will get 45% of that 70% back, if that makes sense. Okay. So you essentially you are quite covered then. You're quite covered, and actually, not to get sort of too kind of technical and into the numbers, but the first 250 grand that every single company raises, they have something even better called SEIS, which is the same as what I've just said, except rather than 30%, it's 50% straight back to you. So if I invest £10,000, I get £5,000 immediately back, and I still get that downside cover, protection if it goes bust. So yeah, you really are quite protected. And as I say, if it goes well, you keep 100% of it, and that's what people really like, because you've just sold something, done really well, and then you're like, God, I've got to pay tax on that. Anything that's tax exempt is obviously always very nice. So that's why, fortunately, we have a very thriving angel investment kind of community and culture in the UK, because we have this good scheme. And there are lots of other countries that are quite jealous of that, and trying to sort of copy it in many ways, because it is really good, and successive governments have actually kept it going, and in many ways expanded it. If it wasn't there, it would be a lot harder to raise the startup, because obviously, as we've alluded to, plenty of them do go to zero. If you didn't get anything back and you were risking 100% of your cash, it would be a bit scarier to make those small checks, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would then actually, we probably wouldn't have like the thriving kind of entrepreneurs that we do in the UK, because if they can't raise, because angels are scared of like losing 100% of their cash and stuff, it would be like a real push-pull.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need angels, because there are lots of great funds in the UK, but increasingly, over time, funds tend to manage more and more cash, therefore need to write bigger and bigger checks. And so what they end up doing is ending up investing later and later and later in a business's life cycle. So many of the great funds have to just turn around to companies and say, come back to us when you're doing 3 million of revenue or whatever. So there's this bigger and bigger gap before the funds are relevant, when you still need to raise capital. You've still got to pay for loads of stuff. I mean, you could do it yourself, but most people aren't in that position, where you've got an awful lot of growing to do to get to a point where you're relevant funds. Who do you raise that from? You've got to go and raise it from angel investors, and it would be incredibly hard to do that without this stuff. Yeah.
So say I have a business idea. I want to start, I don't know, lunch boxes, for example. And I source you out as a good investor. I send you my deck. What are the 3 things you're going to look at first straight away? Sorry, I'll give you a bit of context. I've been running the business for 3 years. I'm maybe at a 5 mil. No, that's probably too high. Maybe I'm at a 2.5 mil revenue.
Yeah.
So like I'm not small, but I'm pretty small, but as in like, it turns over money. And yeah, that's about as much as at this point.
Okay. I mean, the first thing at quite a high level is just the general kind of look and feel of the deck. Like, this is how you're getting your brand across. And I think it's really important that, you get the look and the feel of the brand across, that you sell yourself well. I see plenty of decks which have been put together by, probably the founder or someone who hasn't got any kind of background in design.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a real missed opportunity, because for a very small amount of money, you could probably get someone to tart it up and make it look really good. And it's just, if that's your, it's like paying for a big billboard or a TV ad and just sort of doing it slapdash and doing it yourself. You just wouldn't, you wouldn't do that. So general kind of look and feel. I think combination of factors, obviously, your actual traction, you're doing 2.5 million revenue. What does that actually look like? What are the channels? How has that grown? Has that been a really kind of smooth, journey, or have you sort of unlocked a couple of things? Has that suddenly ramped up really recently? So yeah, understanding at a more granular level what that revenue looks like. I mean, and crucially, understanding the size of the prize, because you might be reaching 2.5 million, you might have smashed it. That might be the whole market. You might be the market leader. There's no room for growth. Is there actually a really interesting market to go into, or one to build? Is there actually a compelling reason for why this is going to be the product that everyone's going to want, and that 2.5 million is scratching the surface, and this could become a 250 million revenue business in 5 years' time? So I think it's kind of getting across, is this exciting at scale? Can this really be like a amazing business that we all know and love? Is there an opportunity for this company to own that? Is there a gap in the market? Are the big incumbent companies doing it doing it badly and leaving some open space, or is it genuinely a case of this doesn't exist, and the reason, and that's often obviously harder to get across as to why it doesn't exist, but why should it exist. And then I'm jumping around and putting more than 3 things in here, but
no, this is really helpful.
How are you going to do that? Realistically, right, we're going to get into these retailers, we're going to move into food service, we're going to move into whatever, we're going to do collaborations with brands and start doing branded lunchboxes, we're going to do, we're going to do all sorts of different things, we're going to work with this celebrity who's got an amazing audience in this space, we're going to go into these other countries. So a kind of, often it's sort of a finger in the air, because this might be what you're going to do over the next 5 years, and it's going to rely on a lot of capital coming in, and it's early days to be talking about this, but have a compelling plan as to how you are going to take it from here to there, and what comes in between. And
how quickly do you like, I'm going to bring it back to dating, but when you go on I don't know how many dates you've been on, but I'm assuming you've done some. And relatively quickly, don't you? You sit there, and I think within like the first, honestly, probably like 90 seconds, I'm like, this is me or it's not me.
Yeah.
Is it similar when you open a deck? Are you pretty like, I know very quickly if this is going to be a yay or nay?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is, because, often, again, just going back to the sort of high level of like good deck versus bad deck, sometimes decks where I'm 5 or 6 slides in and I still don't know what it is. I'm still like, I don't get it. You haven't explained what the product is. You haven't explained why I should be interested in it. So sometimes, you're just turned off completely. Other times, very quickly, I'm just not the customer. And look, there are businesses I've invested in where I'm not the target customer, but I can see that there is a target customer, and they've impressed upon me that audience is there. It might be designed for someone half my age, of a different gender. It might be, so obviously I'm happy to invest in something that's not just directed at me, but sometimes I'm just like, I'm not convinced that this is a thing. I'm not convinced this is needed. So I think pretty quickly, both the sense of like personal taste, just how it's delivered, and just, do I get it? Do I understand what even the problem you're trying to solve is, pretty quickly. So I think the dating analogy is pretty apt, is that you get a pretty good sense pretty quickly. You're not sitting in a pub with someone, so it's easier to extricate yourself from things. But look, the vast majority of decks I get sent, I say thanks but no thanks, best of luck, and it's not for me, and that's always going to be the way with everything. But occasionally, and it's funny because obviously in the world of food and drink, which is so much of what I do and so much of what you do, seeing it on a page is one thing. You've then got to try the product. So obviously, then it's a question of going out and finding it, or messaging the founder and saying, would you mind sending me some samples or whatever. Had a lovely delivery of kimchi arrive on my doorstep this morning. So looking forward to that. But you've got to try the product, got to see it in real life, touch and feel the packaging, etc. So but a good deck can do a lot of the heavy lifting and get you pretty excited about it.
I think actually it's something that I have a couple of decks for Getting to Grow, and I know that Elliot behind the screen here we're doing it as we speak, and that is not my bag. Like, I am so good at, like, put me in front of a customer, oh my gosh, I would, like, that is where I shine. Like, I am so customer, like, facing. The day-to-day, like, behind the numbers, making a deck, like, the admin, like, literally, like, I can't stand it. I am all for the whole, like, just let me sell, just let me get in front of the customer. Like, that is where I, like, I get, like, that gets me out of bed. Like, I love a customer meeting. And it's funny because I think, like, there is so much value in having a good deck and, like, having all the information that you can bring with it. And, like, my decks, when I look at, like, when I sell, are so top line. Like, sometimes there's literally no words on a deck. It might just be a GIF.
Yeah.
And I will talk, and there's this man, and I always end some of my decks were quite funny, and there's like this one GIF. and it's a guy, and he's just like this big, like he's quite a large gentleman, and he's got this like bottle of Moet. Sorry, my brother's girlfriend works for LVMH, and she's like, it's Moet, Zoe.
Yeah.
I know, but then you sound like an idiot. So I'm like,
exactly. Then you've got to explain yourself.
Exactly, and then Moet, and he's there with all this like money, and that's how I like close some of my sales. It's quite funny, but there is so much value in having like a really good deck behind you, and I do quite a lot of like mentoring with some like younger sales ladies. And I look at their deck and I'm just like, firstly, like way too many words. I don't really even know. Like, I'm completely confused. Can you just talk to me? Like, before you even get your laptop out.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you don't have the like privilege of that and I have to send it to you, I'd still keep it really top line. Like, sometimes even a picture and like 4 words about me is like more relevant than like, this is my life story.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, like to that point I made about sometimes not knowing what the product is, you get these incredibly dense sort of essentially like just Word docs, just like 500 words on a page, and I'm like, just show me a picture of the product, so I understand what it is. I'm not diving into all that. So yeah, absolutely, like imagery, keep it clear, keep slides nice and clean, and just key messages. I think the elephant in the room here is that obviously what does best is the actual voiceover from the founder. So obviously what you want to do is convert that person to allowing you to talk them through it. So, you can say, here's my deck, would love the opportunity to talk you through it. The deck does an okay job, but I can really give you the kind of inside scoop. I have seen people use, I don't know if you've come across Loom and various things where you can record yourself, and so they can be looking at the deck while you're kind of talking away in their ear. So that's like the next best thing, I guess, to that actual kind of live read through. So a few different options, but yeah, ultimately, as is the case in any form of sales, you're trying to get in front of them. You're trying to get in there. And I know founders who their conversion rate of like pitching in person to an investor and getting them to it is incredible.
Yeah.
But they just need to get in the room with those people, and you are competing with a lot of other people to get that time and get that kind of mental headspace. So it is quite, that's the challenge. Can you make your deck good enough to get you in the room, and then you do the rest? I
would rather, honestly, nobody the pre-read thing, like I'm yay and a nay and again. I'm like for and against a pre-read, because like I don't want anyone to kind of know anything before they've met me, and then they meet me and they're like, right, okay, I get it. Like sometimes you need to just like have a chat with me, and then we can do the whole thing. Yeah. I think if there's a pre-read, it has a massive benefit, like obviously for board slides and stuff, so we have to do pre-reads. It's like a non-negotiable. But sometimes I wish I could tell them first, or they see it first with me.
I think in the investing world that is hard, because I do get sent a lot of messages, cold messages on LinkedIn or whatever, saying, I just want 15 minutes of your time.
I know.
And I go, happy to look at a deck, and then maybe you can set something up, and they go, no, I just really, I promise you. And I'm not, to be honest, probably going to set up a 15-minute call, unless it's a warm intro from someone I really rate, who said, this guy's got the best thing ever. And they don't want to spoil it by sending something. But almost always I ask to see something ahead of time. Yeah. But I get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to just ask a question about like the money side of it and the initial kind of stages, because obviously as an angel investor, you need to have a pot to start with, right? How did you initially make that pot? Was it through like savings when you were head of sales at Deliveroo, like you putting a bit aside, or was it through, I don't know, side hustle stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, combination, because initially, as I say, really, really small investments, just things that I liked. I guess
when you say really small investments, like what are we talking in terms of value? Like
a couple of thousand.
Okay.
And so I guess that was, in place of putting that money away in a savings account or putting it into an ISA or doing something, arguably more sensible. Just for me, my thing was squirreling some money away and putting it into the next cool business I saw, with a view to, thinking it would do really well and I'd make a really good return on it. And as I say, some of those it's worked, some of those it hasn't. But initially I didn't have a pot of capital to deploy. It was just like savings from salary. And then, as I say, I started doing this side hustle, which would generate me the money, and then I would just always reinvest those fees straight back into the business. So I could have kept all that money. I've raised a lot of money for a lot of companies, and the fees from doing that could have basically given me a really amazing salary over the last however many years. I've been doing this for nearly 10 years now, but instead I chose to take the risk and put that money back into all these businesses. So yeah, combination of, I guess, almost like sweat equity, so like getting equity in the business in return for doing them a service, and then also just small amounts of money from savings. The difficult thing, and the thing to address, I guess, is that a lot of companies have a minimum check size. So even if they're not raising a huge amount, let's say they're raising 300,000 or 400,000, a lot of founders go, oh, we want our minimum check size to be £25,000, or realistically like a very large sum of money for the vast majority of people. And so it is quite hard, obviously, to get into angel investing if that's the case. So what I started doing, and what I guess I'm encouraging other people to do, is say, look, that's great, and that's obviously how you are going to raise the big amounts, by dealing with people who can put 25, 50, 100k into something. But let me in for a couple of grand, £5,000, because I'm going to be much more valuable than that person. I'm going to make lots of great introductions for you. I'm going to help you out in all sorts of different ways. So I always tell founders to take it on a case-by-case basis. Absolutely set your minimum, so you don't have loads of time wasters and loads of people that are going to put you through weeks of due diligence and then go, oh, I'm going to put in £5,000. If you're a quick and easy decision, and you say, and by the way, I can introduce you to a couple of big retailers, I can introduce you to an amazing talent agency, I can introduce you to whoever. If there are people that can bring you value, be open to letting them onto the cap table with small amounts of money.
That's really interesting.
And the other thing is, those people sometimes do really well, and maybe they're a founder themselves, and then their business might blow up, and then they might go from putting in 5,000 in one round to putting in 100,000 the next round. You never know what that's going to be like. So I just sort of forced founders basically to take my small amounts of money by being helpful and being persistent, and just being like, I know you want to raise more money than this, but let me in and let me be helpful. And then so now the way I work is it's built into my contract that I can invest however much money I want to invest in the business, whether it's a large amount or whether it's a really tiny amount. So I just say from the get-go, it might be a lot or it might be a couple of grand, but you have to take whatever amount I end up being in a position to invest in the business. So I don't have to go through those kind of negotiations, but that I've been through a lot of that in the early days.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because it is fantastic having someone that's like, here's £500,000, brilliant. But ultimately, like, if they're based in Bangkok and they're not very helpful or whatever it might be, actually someone that's going to give you £5,000 but like knows the industry inside out, has all the connections, can really put you on the map for certain people, can give you warm leads, is London based, that's so valuable. That is so valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think probably not quite as simplistic as this, but there's probably a kind of inverse correlation in terms of ticket size and helpfulness. You get the people that can put in huge amounts of money can do so because either they're at the very end of their career and they're sort of pretty checked out, or because they are doing this all over the place and they have the ability to write these kind of checks. So do they have much time for you? Whereas you might find an amazing person, knows the industry inside out, they can only put in £5,000, but they might be, your best mentor, your best secret weapon. So finding those people and being flexible in terms of the amount that those people invest is important.
And you've invested in a lot of businesses, obviously. What makes a founder's, we've spoken about the deck, but when you get to the pitch level, what makes a pitch really, really stand out?
I think it's just being clear and compelling in terms of, the things we alluded to earlier of why this person or why this team, why this product, getting across not just what it is and why it's sort of, but why is it better than the competition? Why is it actually going to be the one that defines the category, that is the go-to, product in that space? So it's just obviously being able to be quite dynamic and nimble and deal with hard questions. And everyone has obviously things like Dragon's Den in their mind. It's not like that. But being able to be challenged on stuff and think on your feet, but also just get across like what the mission is and why you're going to be the one to crack this category.
And what does the fundraising process actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I mean, there's no sort of easy answer to that, because sometimes it all depends on a load of different factors. How much demand there is in the funding round, how quickly that business is growing. Sometimes funding rounds can be done and dusted in a couple of weeks. Sometimes they can take a year. I mean, there really is a huge range. But essentially, it's go out to the market, get the conversations going, fill the top of your funnel. And again, I'm using lots of these sort of sales references because that's ultimately what it is. It's a sales process. You are getting it in front of lots of people, and then you're having an initial conversation with them, getting through to a stage where maybe they say, great, send us your financials, we're going to go and do a bit of due diligence, let's meet up in person week after next. So it's sort of trying to move everyone through these stages roughly at the same time. What you don't want to do, what is different to a sales process is if you're selling to a whole bunch of different clients, it doesn't matter if you close one client way before another. In this case, you sort of have to bring everyone together at the same time. A round has to actually crystallize and sort of coalesce at the same time. So that is quite a sort of a nuanced detail around fundraising, is that you might have someone who 2 weeks into the process is like, great, I'm in, I want to put in 100K. And that's great, but you're not actually ready to take that money because you need to get 500K in. So then you have to keep that person warm, keep checking in with them, keep giving them good news while you get everyone else to the same stage as them. So that's a sort of nuanced thing. But ultimately, it's like getting the conversations going, cutting ties with the ones who it's not going anywhere. They might tell you that, you might get a sense that they're just sort of wasting your time.
It's quite like dating.
Yeah.
You're bringing it back to you got to cut the ties, the ones that are wasting your time. Like my bread's like, it is so true when you think you got to keep some warm, but am I going to find better?
Yeah, absolutely. And
you're playing the game of it.
And what gets these things across the line is a lot of FOMO, a bit of competition. An investor hears that someone else is going to do it, and either they want to do it with them or they want to, oh no, don't go with them, go with me. So there's a lot of that kind of human psychology to it. And the other thing that's, I guess, most similar to that is I always tell founders, I see founders kind of always trying to convince themselves they should take money from someone. And I'm like, but you clearly aren't getting on with them, and you've already found them really annoying through this process.
Yeah.
And obviously sometimes money is money. You just need the money in, and you just think, and one reality is that actually a lot of investors talk a huge amount about the value add and how involved they're going to be, and then you never hear from them ever again. So the reality is that you're not going to be spending a huge amount of time. I think founders get hung up on that, but you are going to be spending some time with them, and they are going to have a little bit of a hold on you. They are going to own a small part of your baby, your business. So don't go into business with someone you really don't get on with and you think, I'm going to clash with this person down the line, because you are setting yourself up to have a relationship of sorts with this person for potentially 10 years, maybe more. So do not think, they're not too bad. Reference them as well. Ask other founders they've invested in, because I sometimes, see scenarios where I see an investor being really, really difficult. And then I'll come across a founder who'll be like, God, yeah, they invested in my business 5 years ago and they've been an absolute nightmare, and they've been, so negative for the business. And the wrong investor can be really bad for your business. That's another thing that we should cover, is that, people can be quite blasé. They're a bit annoying or whatever. Some investors can cause real problems and can, go behind your back and, end up investing in competitors, or they can, go to your board and say, we should get rid of this founder. And, there are all sorts of really bad stories out there too. So not all investors are created equal. There are some people you do not want on your cap table out there, both individuals and funds and everything in between. So absolutely kind of switch the story and actually, and this is quite a good psychological thing, but before we go ahead, I want to ask you some questions. What value will you bring to this? Can I speak to some other companies, some other founders that you've invested in? And I think that's quite a good way of sort of, making that person be like, oh God, I really do want to invest in this business because I'm being sort of, I'm on show and I've got to prove
absolutely.
my worth to it. So yeah, there's a whole story there with the psychological elements to fundraising.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine, actually. And how much money do you have out in the world with your 100 businesses at the moment?
A lot. I mean, I've invested in over 100. I mean, everything from a few thousand to my biggest ever investment was around 35,000, I think. And I've followed on into some of these businesses as well. So yeah, a lot of money that is tied up.
Yeah.
It's not like investing in stocks and shares, and you can't just press a button and sell them. It's completely illiquid. It is there until either there's an exit, either there's a future funding round where I'm in a position where I can sell my shares to a new investor coming in, or a large company buys one of these companies and I get paid out, or the company goes public. And in all of these scenarios, that can often be many, many years after investing. So it's like buying a house that you are then unable to touch and unable to sell until 5 to 10 years down the line. So yeah, it's an interesting asset class. It's an interesting place to put all of your investments. I do have a pension and ISA and all the sort of normal stuff, but the vast majority of my money I've earned over the last 15 years is all tied up in these completely illiquid startups. So yeah, fingers crossed, I get some exits from them. But it's most people with a lot of money to invest allocate a pretty small percentage of that capital to this type of asset, because there's a lot of upside, but there's also a lot of downside, and you've got that complete lack of liquidity. Most people would put X percentage into property and into stocks and into bonds, and then be like, oh, and I've got my fund money, which I'm going to put into the risky early stage startups. I've just inverted that and put the vast majority into the wacky startups, and a very small amount into the kind of safe, steady, thing that's going to see me through my old age. But
risk isn't like, my dad's an entrepreneur, and he's earned all his money by being risky.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
exactly.
you have to have that as well. And what has been your most successful return on investment in terms of like brand or financial?
I've had a few good ones. I mean, actually, so yeah, back to things like SURI toothbrushes and Surreal cereal and a few others. So, I mean, SURI is a great example. I got into that business when it was valued at £2 million, and now it's doing tens and tens of millions of pounds of revenue. And
really, it's doing that much?
Yeah.
Wow.
And if the US goes well, each listing will probably be more than the whole of the UK market is worth to them now. So look, touch wood, Mark can talk more about it, but hopefully that business is going to get bought for hundreds of millions.
Like a wild.
By someone, exactly. A wild or potentially even bigger. So, that would be an amazing return from getting in at 2 to getting out at, several hundred. So touch wood. And I've had a few.
And you wouldn't pay tax on that?
Wouldn't pay any tax on that, no.
Whoa, I need to get in the game.
Yeah, so that would be good. I mean, again, they're not all like that, but I've got loads of ones that are doing really well. I mean, some more recent ones in like the F&B space. I got in very early in Mother Root, which is doing really well.
Beth's coming on again.
Great. Yeah, she's wonderful. Stocked is doing very well. Space Goods is doing very well. Jux is doing very well. Over, like fertility supplements, doing incredibly well. So loads and loads of them. I mean, like, I think I've got some really good ones. I've got a good eye for it. A lot of them are doing very well. Let's see. I have Surreal cereal wearing my Surreal socks. Surreal are killing it, and they have been. Kit and Jack have done a great job, and they've been very conservative. They haven't actually raised that much money. They haven't brought on lots of big funds, but they've marketed it so well. Yeah. They've grown really nicely. They've got a huge D2C business, and then more recently, Waitrose and Sainsbury's and etc. has done really well. They they could grow the business even faster than they are. Like I think they get a lot of interest from sort of overseas and big retailers, but they've just, they really know exactly what they want to do. They've grown it really, really well. At some point, that's gonna blow up. A really big investor's gonna come in, or a really big company's gonna buy them. So that's a great example. And yeah, so loads. So yeah, fingers crossed. The big acquirers of this world. Ultimately, I'm kind of very dependent on whether it's Unilever or Mars or Pepsi or whoever being like, you know what, we've been watching these guys for a while. They're doing really well.
Yeah.
We are not good at that. We're not very good at innovation. We're not very good at capturing this younger demographic. We're not very good at health, or we're not very good at whatever. Let's snap them up. So hopefully over the next few years, Kellogg's buys Surreal, and Diageo buys Moth, and all this kind of stuff happens.
I love Robert Moth. What a cool, I've had him on as well.
Nice. Yeah. I'm sure if we went through my roster, you probably had all of them on.
Pentime, Mother Roots, Soil, all done. Yeah, I mean it's kind of fun actually when you sit here and you think about it. But all the founders I've had on, it's quite cool. And actually, if you're an investor with all of them, I've got my brain thinking about something, so. Cut to my ears. But valuations. So valuations, I think, can be an emotional topic. I think obviously loads of businesses want to say that they're valued at probably slightly more than they think they might be. How should founders think about valuation in the early stages? And how do you value a business?
Yeah, well, look, the reality is that at a later stage in the business's life, there are very set ways in which you value a business. It's in different industries, it differs, but you might be acquired for 3 times revenue or 7 times EBITDA. There are very easy ways in which a banker or a big company acquiring your business can say, right, Zoe's Lunchbox business is doing £1 million of EBITDA. In this sector, businesses trade for between 3 and 5 times EBITDA. We're going to buy it for 4 million. That is super simple. When you're really early stage and you haven't got profit, how do you value this business? In most cases, it's just a negotiation. A founder sets out with a number in mind, and if it's way off and the market just sort of says no, you just end up, you're basically saying, I want to give you this percentage of the business, and the investors say, no, I want more than that for that amount of money, and you end up somewhere in between. And realistically, the way it's always worked out is most early stage funding rounds, you end up giving away roughly 20% of your business, between 10 and 20% of your business. You need 500k to do what you want to do, to hire the people you want to hire, to buy the stock, to support the marketing. And so you go, right, I want 500k. I'm prepared to give away 15% of my business. There's a bit of back and forth. You end up giving away 18% of your business, and that's what the valuation is. So you sometimes get founders who've got an amazing track record. They sold their last business for a huge amount of money, and they are able to basically demand a higher valuation. It's not always a good thing. I've seen examples of founders who, they're really bullish, they're in a really interesting sector, or they've got a really good track record. They go in really hard at the start, they get a really big valuation. Then you've got to justify that. Then they end up raising money again in a year's time, and revenue is still quite low, and people just look at it and go, sorry, you're doing 200k of revenue and you're trying to value the business at £8 million. That doesn't add up. So it's not always the best thing. You actually, sometimes founders are better off being more conservative because you want to sort of grow with it. But long-winded answer of saying, realistically, you come with an argument as to why you need the amount of money you're trying to raise. And a founder, you've got no reason to raise more money than you need. And essentially it's that percentage of business that you're willing to give away. And we sort of, I guess, all know this from Dragon's Den. Yeah. But that is, those are not the numbers that you are doing. The classic thing in Dragon's Den of just being like, I'll give you the money, but for 80% of, the silly numbers get put out there. If that happened, you'd be screwing yourself. You'd be screwing that investor. It's a good investor realizes they want the founder to keep a really good chunk of the business. Why? Because you want that founder to work their ass off and produce an amazing result.
Yeah.
If you get to a point, and this happens quite frequently, where a founder has gone through multiple funding rounds, maybe there are 2 or 3 founders, and actually they're quite disincentivized. They end up with a very small percentage of their own company. Who's that good for? Like, why does the founder doesn't want a good exit at that point?
It's not that beneficial to them.
A good investor gets that, they want to do well out of it, but the founder's also got to be kept hungry and kept incentivized and have something really big to play for. So yeah, there are a lot of different things going on. You do just, when times are good and there's lots of money flying around, valuations do sort of creep up and then they kind of correct and come back down again. But yeah, roughly speaking, there are pretty. You also, if you go out and say want to raise 500 grand at a 10 million pound valuation, you're going to get investors coming back to you and go, a company in a similar space doing the same numbers as you is valuing themselves at a third of that. So why would we touch you? So you're ultimately just making yourself uninvestable. Yeah. So it's just a question of, it's like how do you price a product? Like how do you put a price on a tub of yogurt?
Look at the market.
You look at the market and you say, well, we're better than them. Our product's better than them.
Yeah.
We've got better packaging, better products. So we're going to be a bit more. It's the same rationale.
Yeah. And investor kind of red flags, what would make you walk away from a deal?
What would make me as an investor walk away? I think just finding a founder hard to work with. If a founder suddenly, got a bit ahead of themselves and suddenly said, you know what, we're about to close the round, but actually I think the valuation should be way higher, and suddenly kind of moving the goalposts, and vice versa. If an investor tries to do that, probably more common. An investor goes, oh great, we're going to do the deal. Actually, I'm going to give you, less money, and I want more of the, more of the business. So any kind of not sticking to an agreement, being a bit slippery. What other investor red flags are there? I think I would be. It's not a question of like taking stuff on board and like, again, not that many investors do bring genuine value, and I think often founders should sort of back themselves and be like, well, I know how to run this business best. But if there's any instance of sort of trying to give some constructive advice or trying to help them, and you just see, right, they're really not taking on any external, input, and it's just going to be my way or the highway. It depends. That goes either way. Either you think, fair enough, like we'll see if it works for them. You do need to be quite driven and sort of single-minded, but you might think, God, this person's going to be a nightmare. I can see this crashing and burning, and they might just go too far. But yeah, again, anything that you would see as a red flag in any other area of their life, as we sort of alluded to, you're not necessarily looking for just like a great person that you really want to hang out with. So the red flags can sometimes be part of what makes them good. But there are obviously red flags where you think, God, that person's going to be really toxic to work for, or you think that person's going to rub investors up the wrong way. Ultimately, someone could be super smart and have an amazing idea, and the product could be great. And if you just think no one wants to work for that guy,
nobody wants to work with a dickhead.
Then that's going to be really hard. So yeah, no dickhead policy is always good.
Yeah.
In any aspect of life. But yeah, I think that's overlooked sometimes. That are they going to recruit and retain a group of people? They're not going to be able to do this on their own, especially in consumer. If it's something like tech, sometimes, one person can do a huge amount or can be quite sort of removed from the day-to-day of the company. In something like consumer, you are all in the trenches together quite a lot of the time. And it's there's a lot of interaction between even the most senior people in the company and the most junior. So like you've got to recognize someone who's not going to be great at that, and they've got to be investable. So any sort of hint of kind of financial impropriety, whatever, is going to be a bit of a red flag as well.
Yeah, fair enough. And your angel obviously portfolio, as we mentioned, contains like over 100 companies. And is there kind of one similarity across all the companies that you could say is like a trend?
Good question. I mean, there are lots of sort of categories within there, whether it's sort of better for you in the sort of F&B world or whatever, but not really. I mean, look, I've got a real range in there from, paddle clubs to fintech to, to gut-friendly soft drinks. I mean, it's a lot of different things. Can I draw a line between all of them? No, I think it's just ideas that I like, categories that I think could be disrupted, and founders that I think can do that disrupting.
And, once you have become an investor, that relationship, as we've mentioned, could last a really long time. It can last years. You said, or your money's sort of out there waiting for it to kind of return, or hopefully returns, or obviously could not. What makes a really good founder-investor relationship, and what makes a really bad one?
Good. That's a very good question. I mean, it's funny because some founders are brilliant at the updates and the communication with investors, and you feel like you know exactly what's happening, and you feel the wins, and you get a message every time they get a new listing, or there's anything going on. So some companies where I genuinely feel like I'm in the office with them, I know what's going on. Others never hear from. And there was one funny instance recently, actually, with a business where I'd introduced a few investors to them back in the day. This was probably back in 2020, 2021, and I'd invested, and a few other people invested with me, and something related to this company had come up in the news, which we were like, God, the company should be doing really well. Like this things are that whole space is like really blowing up. But we hadn't heard from this round at all. And I had a few people, and this is not what I do. I don't sit as the middleman and kind of relay information, but they were, have you heard from him? Obviously, they thought I was sort of closer to that founder. And I was like, no, I haven't heard from that founder in years. And we all sort of simultaneously WhatsApp this founder, it turns out, because he messaged me back and was like, why have my entire cap table like WhatsApp me today? It's because they'd all come to it through me. And yeah, the update was incredible. The update was, sorry, I've just been heads down, and we've just massively expanded, and we're working with so and so and so and so, and it was great. But I was just like, why didn't you tell us?
Yeah,
like, we
would be part of that.
We would have been super excited. And I think the reality is he didn't need to, and he didn't need our help with anything, and he was just cracking on and doing a great job. And fair enough. If all the ones that went silent, I eventually hear back from, and they're like, we've 50x the business, and I'll take that all day. But yeah, I think a lot of founders are really considered, and not only are they giving updates, but they're also giving asks, and they're saying, by the way, we're hiring a head of brand. Has anyone come across a great one? And if you're like me and you're across loads of these different businesses, you do have a decent network for talent, or you do know who's a really great agency to work with. A lot of, the asks that I get, and a lot of asks that investors get in general, is around obviously further funding. Like, to all my angel investors, thank you so much for investing last year. We're now got to a point where we need to raise a lot more money, and we want introductions to funds. Like, maybe we're expanding into the US. Has anyone got a way of introducing me to imaginary ventures, or whoever it might be in the States? So yeah, you should treat your angel investor, your cap table, as an amazing resource. They might have incredible connections for a whole range of things. So I think it's a real missed opportunity if you don't leverage it. Sometimes founders just like, look, I'm too busy, and sometimes they feel rightly or wrongly that their investor base can't help with whatever they're going through, or they're not well positioned. Which is why it's amazing if you can find kind of industry experts to be on your cap table, and then you can always go to them for help and advice and connections. But yeah, I think, again, there are founders that do monthly updates, there are founders that do quarterly updates, and there are founders that do 0 updates. And yeah, it's a shame to not keep up to speed. There's a lot of funds, when they invest, have what's called information rights, and they actually contractually put in there, you need to tell us, XYZ at these periods. So you are actually obliged to put together reporting. And angel investors obviously don't have that, but it's a bit of a missed opportunity to not keep them up to speed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think so many people probably don't share because maybe they think like, oh, I don't maybe have anything that relevant to share right now, or I don't want to share because actually that might open up more questions, and you can go into yourself a bit with it. Whereas actually, if you constantly keep the communication flow, it's actually so much easier to then keep the ball rolling, and like then they can hear the highs and the wins. Because I think if you've put money in me, I'd always assume you want good news.
Yeah.
I'd always assume you don't want to hear the shit days. You don't want to be like, oh crap, my money's at risk. Like, that's what I'd be nervous about.
Yeah.
So I would be like, oh, I'll not tell him that. I'll only tell him when I've got a good bit of good news. But then ultimately, that's not life. Like, I can't always just, like, it's like Instagram. It's always the highlight reel. But, you're not showing me when you've had a really shit day. That's not normal. Every business has ebbs and flows.
Absolutely. So I think a good like structure is, wins, highs, losses, lows, whatever. And then, random sort of what has happened. It could be like, we've made a hire, or like, sometimes, it's quite nice to make you feel part of the culture. Like, we had a company away day, or we had a celebration. Here's a picture, and you're like, oh right, wow, that company's now got 25 employees. Like, didn't know that. And then ask, like, can any of my investors introduce me to an amazing fractional CFO, or whatever it might be, like a very specific ask, and often you need to follow up on that, and then maybe you'll get a WhatsApp from that founder being like, don't know if you saw the update, but we're looking for this fractional CFO, do you have a thing? Let me know if you know anyone. But yeah, as I say, hugely varies. Some are incredible. You feel completely up to speed with everything that's happening. And it's funny because then if I'm in a position where I'm speaking to a VC fund, or I'm speaking on a podcast, and someone goes, how is that company doing? I can be like, oh, well, they just won Carrefour in France. Or they just, they're about to launch into Costco in the US or whatever. And if you fill people in, they can fill other people in, and you get the word out there. So it's a free tool of, getting good news out there if you want to use it. But, not everyone does.
And what was your fastest investment? So from like meet to put cash in the business, and what was your longest investment from meet to put cash in the business?
Good question. Fastest. I mean, there have been ones that legal tech one I mentioned at the start. I was a customer, so I sort of asked to be in. They didn't have to pitch to me at all. I'd already used it. There have been a few, product ones, which again, I've just really loved the product and I've just wanted to do it straight away. Longest ones, I'm trying to think, have there been people who've sort of chipped away at me over the course of years and eventually I've invested? I can't think of one, to be honest, off my head. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's probably a founder kind of beating the table at the moment, being like, I messaged you for 5 years before you eventually met me and responded. But yeah, I'm usually, because I like to get in early, I usually don't have these scenarios where I say, oh, come back to me when you're doing whatever. I usually try and like say yes or no pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can change your mind and come back to it, but yeah, I'll have a think. I'll get back to you on that one.
And looking back at all the founders that you've backed, what advice do you wish every founder raising money could hear before they start the process?
I think the one thing, and I was talking to a founder this morning about this, is just that, do your prep and do it in a very kind of concerted, right, I'm going into fundraising mode. I'm going into a fundraising period. Do it properly. Don't think, oh, we'll just start the fundraise. We'll reach out to some of our existing investors. In a few more weeks, we'll reach out to some new investors. And then maybe in a month's time, we'll ask people, oh, do you have any suggestions we speak to? Do it all at once. Because, we talked about it earlier. You want things to all be moving at the same speed. If you get into a piecemeal situation where you're trying to keep some conversations warm, you haven't even started reaching out to other people, different people at different places.
Yeah.
That's just messy. Get your house in order, get the materials ready, get the data room ready. What you're going to be asked, so get that in a good place. A slightly different angle to this is think about, when am I going to be raising where over the next few months I can take some time away from the day-to-day business because I'm going to have to. I'm going to be doing investor calls all day. And so not only is the business going to be, not requiring so much of my time, but also potentially I've got some good news coming. We're going to win a listing with Tesco in 2 months. So I think because that is what gets funding rounds across the line, is that during the course of the months you're speaking to these people, revenue goes up by 20%, or you get an amazing listing, or you launch a new product, or something happens. If it's just business as usual and 4 months after your first conversation with them, you're like, yeah, we're doing pretty much the same, and no, we haven't really had time to speak to new retailers because we've been focused on the fundraise. And look, it's such a genuine response, and what I'm saying is not easy. It's like, run your business, grow your business, and have loads of fundraising conversation at the time. It's why being a founder is really tough. Like, not going to, beat around the bush. This is doing a lot of difficult things at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, be ready. Start it all at the same time. Try and get things together. Leverage your network. Say to your existing investors, do you have a contact here? Can you help me with this? Like, get as many conversations going at the same time. Play them off against each other. Mention to someone, oh, we've been speaking to this fund, and you've got to give them a reason to invest. You've got to give them a reason to move faster. And it's just, it is herding cats, but it is lots and lots of conversations, getting things moving, following up, giving them the updates. There are some people who will go quiet for a bit, but keep chipping away, keep being like, oh, by the way, we've had another couple 100,000 committed from so-and-so. And by the way, since we last spoke, we just got this listing, or we just got whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of conversation. So, have your spreadsheet, your CRM, whatever, and just think, right, that week we are kicking it off. We are going to reach out to those 100 people. We are going to block out, those days and that week to just do back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big thing. It's like launching a big new product
Well, it's exactly like selling. Sometimes I'll have weeks where I'll be like, right, hotels is my target this week. I'm only going to do Monday to Friday. I'm only going to speak to hotels. Nothing else is going to come into my zone. Yeah. Next week it might, but this week it's purely a hotel week. Yeah. And then at the end of that, I'm like, oh, brilliant. I've got actually 20 calls because I've outreached to 1,000 people, because listen, you got to reach out to probably 2,000 to get sometimes one bloody call. But,
and it's the same with fundraising. It's a numbers game to some extent. Like,
absolutely.
The most nailed on perfect fit investor might just not be investing at that point. They might just do a similar deal. They might be waiting for another business to close. A few of their existing companies might be doing really badly, and they've got to support them and put more capital in. You cannot just be like, well, we know the perfect 5 people, we're just going to reach out to them. That will not work in the vast majority of cases. Yeah. And the number of founders I've had literally in the last week who've said, we thought, the business is growing really well, so we thought we could just do a couple of emails and the funding round would be all wrapped up.
I'm surprised founders have said that, because surely if they're a founder, they know how hard the slog is to get your product in front of like retailers and customers. So the fact they think it would be easier with investors is quite weird, in my opinion.
In these cases, it's actually been not sort of first round, it's been second rounds where it's almost like, it's like going through childbirth or something. A lot of people say that it's so tough and traumatic, but then your body actually makes you forget it, and you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. So a lot of founders go through fundraising. Yeah, okay. It's really, really tough, but then they're like, but I did it. I did it. And they're like, now my business is way better. We're doing 5 times the revenue. Yeah. It should be easy. And they forget, oh God, no, it's not. Whatever revenue you're doing, the investor always wants more, or they always want whatever. So you actually still, even though you're nailing it, even though the business is growing really well, even though that investor said, come back to us when you're doing those numbers, and you are doing those numbers, you still need to reach out to loads of them. Yeah. You still need to have your shit together. Yeah, it's hard. It really is a huge part of being a founder and being a good founder. And it's not necessarily what people sign up to do. It's not like what they love. Some founders love it. Some founders just love selling. So whether they're selling their product or they're selling their business, but it's tough, and you need to sadly you need to give it a lot of time and attention. Otherwise, it's just not gonna work.
We're just gonna end with a quick fire round. So first things that kind of come to mind. Yeah. One thing founders worry about that doesn't matter.
Oh, good question. This is not quick fire. Not nothing's coming to the top of mind. One thing that founders worry about that doesn't matter. Okay, this is it's probably gonna be controversial, but I often think founders put together loads and loads of financial forecasting, and they go really into detail. And this is a really early stage company. This is more relevant for late stage companies. And they go, we've built a 8-year model, with XYZ. And I think that most investors at the early stage just kind of want to know what your next 2 years are going to look like.
Also, like, you can't really forecast 8 years out. Like, I've been at Coconut Cloud for 8 years. And, when I do my forecast every year, I'm like, honestly, look, if I win another airline, this would trump this. Yeah. Or if I lose an airline, it would also be hugely... Yeah. But yeah, I can put in like a conservative. So it's really hard even doing a year. So how companies have an 8 year, I mean, yeah, you can do like a, compounding growth year on year. We're going to grow by 20% year on year, but like.
And it's usually ending up at some silly number, which is more than the entire market size. And
literally.
that is actually another, not quite the question, but another thing that's a massive turn off for investors is when you get often very, very like green young founders send you a message saying, we are going to sell the business in year 3 for this money, giving you a 7.8 times return on your money. And you're like, what bullshit is that?
Yeah,
like,
what bollocks
what,
is that?
why are you even saying that? Like, how naive do you think I am that I'm like, oh, wow, is that really going to happen that way? So, yeah, being like incredibly prescriptive and like, they think they're probably projecting lots of confidence and they've shown, real kind of forward thinking. But actually, that kind of lack of awareness that you do all the right things and then you just see what happens is a bit worrying. So yeah, being too sort of cocksure about like we're going to sell for exactly this number, exactly that year. Like no one who's ever worked in a business speaks like that.
No,
so,
absolutely. Yeah. Best fundraising deck you've ever seen?
Ooh, good question. What is a good one? The one weirdly that's coming into my mind, just because it was a very short deck and it was very nicely designed and very clear and just like this is what the market opportunity is, this is what our product is, done, was the Mother Root. Mother Root had a very good deck. I just remember it. It's come into my head. It was just like really nice imagery, just explained the shift to non-alc.
It's delicious as well.
It's so good. I have it every day. Yeah. Explained like the interest in all of their ingredients and the health benefits and whatever. It just laid it out really nicely and then was just like, bang, we answer all these questions. People are drinking less, concerned about health, but they don't want to, have apple cider vinegar and they don't want, and we just put it all into one, this is the moment you have it. It was just, it was good.
Worst deck you've ever seen? Now, you obviously don't need to name names, but you can allude to a...
I've seen loads of awful ones. Loads and loads and loads. I mean, sometimes they are 50 slides long. Sometimes they're just one pages, which are just, size 6 font of just, dense text. I've seen the worst. So they say the one thing that always comes around is I've gone through decks where I just have no idea what the product is or what it looks like or whatever, and they've just forgotten to actually explain what they do. So yeah, there are some really bad decks out there, but I won't.
Yeah, of course. And one piece of advice for someone about to start their first round.
Yeah, back to that. Yeah, get your self ready, get your deck ready, get your sort of, your target list ready, and just approach it in a very kind of strategic, focused way, and just think, right, as you said, when you're targeting your hotels, this is the week we're kicking it off. I'm going to reach out to this many people. My deck's ready. My, everything is ready to go. I've got samples ready to send out. For stuff like that. Like, obviously,
just get organised.
It's a small thing, but like sometimes you speak to a founder and they go, "Oh, we'll get some samples out to you," and then a week later they go, "Oh, sorry, I never got your address. Let me send that to you." And so on some level, you sort of think, "Oh, well, maybe the investor should be responsible for just buying the product." Whatever. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's not for sale somewhere. But just be super proactive, and it's a small thing, but like pinging that out for like next day delivery and just following up and keeping the momentum.
It has a lot to say for it though, because if you think about it, like, the small things do really make a big difference. Like the little bits of communication, simple things where like they can really make an impact, like getting the samples out really quickly and not delaying it. And, they are really... Yeah, it's funny though, because I've definitely been in situations before where I've wanted to follow up, but like, last week I was stuck in Dubai in the middle of a war and I was really trying to get home, and I had emails in my inbox that I was like, I literally don't have the bandwidth, but it looks really bad on me right now because I haven't got back to them in a while, but like I can't physically. And then I've always sent them an email being like, look, I'm so sorry, it's been like a really... So sometimes there are situations that you literally can't control.
Yeah.
But having
small
things...
thing is that it's the one time in your life probably out of everything else where your diary management is going to be so important. And I do think I see some people who just say, oh, here's my Calendly link, and I guess that works to some extent, but I would just be like,
I don't like that.
Be incredibly like pick one of these times and just like follow up straight away. Offer them time soon. Like, get them in the diary as quickly as possible. Of course, they might cancel or reschedule, or they might say, oh no, I'm free in 2 weeks. But again, coming back to this point, like, you want things to all move at the same pace. You want things to move quickly. Do not let someone fob you off with like, oh, I'm about to go on holiday next week, let's do it after that. Be like, no, let's do something before then. And like, make the time. So I think like being incredibly proactive about getting that call in the diary or getting that meeting in the diary, being like, you know what, I can come to you. Like, let's meet where you are. Again, you will know this inside out. It's anything to do with sales. It's just like, you obviously just don't take no for an answer.
Absolutely not.
You get that in the diary and you go and pitch them.
For sure. Thank you so much for coming on Getting to Grow. It's been a really interesting talk, I think, from seeing it from like an investor point of view. Like, I have so many founders sit where you sit that speak about raising and actually really getting under the skin of like, the kind of raising journey and being an investor has been really interesting. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks for having me.